I'm really looking forward to presenting today and have been looking forward to presenting. This is actually a follow-up to a capstone project that was done at the University of British Columbia recently that looked at driving behaviors and their impact on collisions. And I'm going to focus on the key finding of this study, which is that inconsistent driving is a key risk factor in collisions. This kind of ties in nicely to some of the presentations that were given yesterday that talked about telematics data. And I think this is a perfect example of how you can leverage the data from these devices for more safety benefits. So let's tighten our safety belts and let's get going. I'd like to begin by asking all of you to please close your eyes for a moment. And with your eyes closed, I'd like you to think about the last time you were in a near-miss collision. It could have been on a highway, it could have been on a side road, it could have been backing out of your driveway. And now, with your eyes continue to keeping them closed, think about what happened as you drove away from that near-miss collision. Did your behavior change in any way? Did you find yourself maybe more aware of your surroundings, being more cautious, gripping your steering wheel tighter? And then over time, you went back to that normal and safe driving range. Okay, you can all open up your eyes now that you're back to safety. Or are you? That normal and safe driving behavior may not be as normal and safe as you think. Did you know that your driving behavior could actually get worse and you may not even be aware of it? For example, you may be driving in a flat area and then find yourself in a hilly or mountainous region where there's more skill and attention needed to maintain that same driving behavior. Or you could be driving into heavy traffic or a construction area where you're having to drive aggressively to meet that scheduled appointment. In either of these scenarios, you may not, again, be aware that your behavior is changing. You really don't know, actually, whether your behavior has changed unless you're monitoring the consistency of your driving behavior. Now, let me explain that a little bit further. You can actually detect whether you're consistent if you look at the historical pattern of your driving behavior and compare that to what you're doing today. Okay? This is actually a statistical analysis of your behavior. So there you have it. We don't know whether our behavior is changing unless we're actually monitoring the consistency, statistically monitoring the consistency of our driving behavior. Sounds like a lot of work to know whether we're changing our behavior, doesn't it? But we're not that far off. Insurance companies are already giving most of us the option of installing GPS-type devices in our vehicles to earn discounts, provided we don't exceed those their thresholds, then we have a chance to earn those discounts. Okay. Well, that type of monitoring isn't too different from what we could do today with the telematics that's being collected already. This whole concept of consistency is really important from the study that we did, and collisions are important, but so is consistency if we're trying to reduce the frequency of these collisions and fatalities. So what I'd like to share with you is more about consistency, because that's important if we're trying to reduce the frequency of collisions. And let's come back to how I first learned about consistency. It actually happened for me really early on when I was starting in the workforce. I can remember it really well, actually. I just came out of engineering school, and I was excited about designing products and improving processes. And really the last thing on my mind was improving the consistency or improving solving problems using consistency. But that's exactly what I learned. And so what exactly did I see when I started working? Well, at Ford, I started actually at Ford Motor Company. And at the time I was there, we were just rolling out a new product called the Ford Taurus. Of course, we're all familiar with the Ford Taurus. It was hugely successful. I actually had one myself. And when we rolled the product out, it was really rounded in shape. It was so rounded that we struggled to make components that fit the contour of this vehicle. So much so that, it, first of all, it looked like kind of a jelly bean on wheels. But the facility I was working at, we were generating 50% scrap for a main component for that product. And it was pretty expensive. Every product we were making, we were having to throw one out. Can you imagine as a trucker every delivery you make, you have to give them one away for free, you'd be out of business pretty quickly. So it wasn't until we actually gave the operators a tool to monitor their consistency that we went from 50% scrap to less than 1%. It blew me away. I couldn't believe that we could make so much improvement by just monitoring the consistency of the process. What was it I saw? I saw people monitoring this instead of trying to produce parts to the engineering specification limit, which is what the engineer said was a safe region. They were producing parts as consistently as they could. It was this new mindset that enabled us at Ford to significantly improve our processes. And that mindset wasn't just at the facility I was working at, it was at all of Ford. In fact, this is what actually helped survive, the North American automobile industry survive and compete globally, was this new mindset around consistency. This same mindset could help the trucking industry and the driving public at large to significantly reduce collisions. So how can it do that? Well, before I tell you that secret, I want to share a little bit more about where this methodology came from. It actually came from the US, thank you very much, from an American physicist by the name of Dr. William Shewhart. He was working on solving industrial problems in Bell Labs, and it was actually kind of a form of predictive analytics, which is what the methodology came from. And then it was further popularized by quality management gurus like Dr. Edwards Deming, who helped our allied partners overseas rebuild their economies following World War II. But eventually it found its way back to North America in the 80s to help industries compete globally, including the automotive industry, which is where I first learned about it. So how does this help us drive better? This concept of consistency, I think is an easier example for us to relate to is McDonald's hamburgers. You may not like them or you may not like them, but whenever you buy a Big Mac, it has the same ingredients and it tastes the same. And it's this concept of consistency is what drove business forward in being successful. And that same mindset can also help us drive better. So how can that happen? It certainly doesn't help us with our figures. And it certainly, we don't have any engineering specification limits around driving behavior, but we do have limits. We have limits to how much we can speed, how many hours we can drive. In fact, there's all kinds of limits associated with different rules and regulations for the safe operation of a commercial motor vehicle. The problem here is, if we're using these limits to manage and modify our behavior, it's an archaic way of thinking. Just think about it. We're waiting for ourselves to become a high-risk driver before we're adjusting our behavior. By that time, we could have gotten in an accident. That's the same thing we had in the automotive industry 30, 40 years ago. We would produce parts, and we would assemble them, and then we would wait until the end of the line to inspect them to see whether they're defective or not. And then we would decide whether we could repair them or throw them out. Just imagine a car going down an assembly line with two doors on one side and one door on the other, and you don't know that until you produce the car. Well, who would want to buy the car that was repaired after that? Not me. I mean, that's how archaic our thinking was in the automotive industry 30, 40 years ago, and that's how it is today in trucking. We're still in that same mindset. We're waiting for us to get bad or high risk to actually adjust our behavior. Now just think about it. What if we had a tool that could help us monitor the consistency or when our behavior is starting to wander? That would significantly reduce our risk of collisions. And just think of the benefits. Those devices that insurers are asking us to install in those cars, we'd never be setting up alarms. We'd be earning those discounts. But more importantly, we would be getting home to our loved ones safely. And we'd have a tool that would enable us to feel comfortable knowing that we're doing the best job we can, safety-wise. And this This concept of consistency couldn't come at a better time. Now that the government is regulating ELDs. And these devices collect the same kind of information that the insurers are collecting from these GPS devices. The exciting part here is that information, it wouldn't take that much work to automate the analysis of this data to monitor consistency. And that would help not just truckers, but also insurers rate us more fairly. And this concept of consistency is not just relevant today, it's going to continue to be relevant in the future. As we, right now our focus is on monitoring the consistency of driving behavior, but as we go to autonomous and semi-autonomous and autonomous vehicles, we're going to expand that consistency to monitoring the consistency of the components themselves. We'll start now looking at things like the vibration and the temperature of the components before they begin to fail. Okay, so I've just shared with you, a huge finding here of the study and its benefit to the industry. How do we take advantage of this as a trucking company or as an industry? Well, I can think of two things. First, I think presentations like this, if I can get them out of my mouth, are good and provide help us become more aware of the importance of consistency in monitoring consistency to reduce the frequency of collisions. But secondly, I think it's something we can introduce into our safety programs, especially our driver scorecard initiatives. How would that look? Well, most companies today already offer some kind of bonus or recognition for the number of miles you drive or the number of clean inspections. You can expand that to include the consistency of the drivers, and not just the drivers, but the driver supervisors as well. If you're looking to significantly reduce the risk of collisions in a simple and cost-effective way, look at monitoring the consistency of all of these driving behaviors that are coming from these devices that you're installing in your equipment. And find a way to provide feedback to your drivers and managers on a regular basis. Thank you very much.